This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come and free to go. Free to come and free to go. Open up the book of stars. Open up the book.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking. I'm your host, Sherry Horn Hassan of Karmic Evolution Astrology, coming to you on March 24th, 2022, from Contact Talk Radio. Just a quick reminder that this show aims to bring you the truth about astrology and your soul's karmic evolution. My guest today, I'm very pleased to announce, is professional astrologer, author, and lecturer, Lynn Coyner, who I'll be introducing properly in just a few moments. But first, my usual housekeeping stuff, which is to tell you that you can listen to Karmic Evolution's Astrologically Speaking anytime by simply going to my website at karmicevolution.com and clicking on the upper right-hand portion of the banner labeled Podcast. From there, you can scroll down the page, hear the most recent show, either live or recorded, and or search the archive listings for past shows that you might have missed or to which you'd like to listen again. Separately, feel free to follow me on my Facebook page, Karmic Evolution for Your Soul, where you can sign up for my Conversations About Consciousness newsletter as well. And I'm still offering my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading to listeners for only $99. And that's for those of you who are interested in astrology, want to learn more about the true meaning of your individual birth chart or natal horoscope, because it essentially represents a snapshot of the exact position of the planets at the precise moment and location of your birth. And this tells us a great deal about you. So when used as a tool for soul growth, a Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading can be tremendously helpful for learning your soul's true purpose, how to move towards your highest destiny in this lifetime. It identifies patterns of behavior that originated early in this lifetime or during past lives that may be affecting your current relationships, your career choices or jobs, your finances and or your health, but patterns that no longer serve your soul's karmic evolutionary journey as you move forward in this lifetime. It also provides information and insights into what may have tripped your soul up in the past and how you can entertain new perspectives now in order to gain greater awareness through astrological insight that can bring greater happiness, success, and satisfaction into your life. All this is easy when you take advantage of my 1-hour discounted Karmic Evolution Natal Insight reading for only $99. Simply email me at Sherry, that's SHERI, at karmicevolution.com, and we'll get your reading scheduled as soon as possible. As I like to say, at almost half the regular price, conscious awareness has never been so easy or so affordable. Okay, so let's get on to this week's astro news you can use. The monthly lunar cycle is waning now since last week's March 18th Virgo full moon, which asks us still to release any wishful thinking or unrealistic fantasies by getting our facts straight and dealing with concrete reality now. In addition, the sun's now in proactive, more martial Aries since March 20th, telling us it's better to rely more on our natural instincts and less on impatience in order to avoid any sudden moves that can lead to accidents or mishaps due to any impulsive behavior. When Mercury met with highly expansive and exaggerative Jupiter on March 20th and 21st, depending on your time zone, it set the stage for what we editors like to call purple prose, which is the hyperbolic, over-the-top language. Mercury followed with his conjunction to Neptune and Pisces yesterday, March 23rd, which stimulated our creative imagination, but also cautioned us to separate confused, illusory, or fantastical thinking from clearly understood, channeled spiritual or artistic messages now. As always, it's good to check in with your higher power, universal source energy, and/or the divine realm for clarity at such times. It's interesting also to note how this combination of energies has thus far manifested simply by looking at recent events. One that fits the bill under the waning Virgo full moon portion of this monthly lunar cycle, which, of course, as I said, asks us still to release any exaggeratedly confused, illusionary, delusionary, magical thinking. Remember, Jupiter was prominent at last week's lunation, too, combined with fiery Aries, as the sun has moved into Aries and Mercury is poised to do so later this week. And Aries, who's set up for battle, yet also influenced by that still exaggerative potential for obfuscation of facts, is this week's U.S. Senate hearings for the Supreme Court nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who, if confirmed, would become the historical first female black Supreme Court justice. So it was interesting to watch several GOP senators, including Josh Hawley and Tom Cotton, trot out crazy, unfounded QAnon-influenced tropes about the judges being soft on crime, especially on child pornographers over these past few days. Remember, one of QAnon's main conspiracy theories includes the theme that Democrats harbor and engage in secret sex child rings. Further, Senator Lindsey Graham, and here I'll call attention to both the influence of Jupiter and Neptune as they wax towards their April 12th conjunction, questioned the judge not only about her specific faith, as in asking her directly, "What religion are you?" to which she responded Protestant, but asked if she did indeed truly have faith. Now, this is interesting to me because really all one would need was to have read a page or two about, Brown Jackson's background, her biography, to have that question answered rather than making a show of it. But Graham didn't stop there. Rather, he went over the top and threw a hissy fit, dramatically storming out of the Senate chamber when his time was through after grilling the judge about her advocacy on behalf of her law firm's clients for a Guantanamo Bay detainee imprisoned post 9/11 and barking essentially about how criminals don't deserve fair legal representation under U.S. law, or international criminals, I should say, or those who were labeled enemy combatants under the Bush administration after 9/11. The point here is that these senators under these current astrological energies made a great show of these hearings, which is not atypical, through their attempts to confuse listeners through partial, incomplete, general, or non-factually true information, rather than that which was subjected to Virgo's more critical, factual analysis. Now, I'd also just want to add that I read recently, and I was actually fairly surprised, if not shocked, that 7 of the 9 justices, I think they were mentioning that Ketanji Brown Jackson would become one of the only Supreme Court justices who's ever worked as a public defender. But they also mentioned that she, along with one other justice, which I think was Alito, were graduates of public high schools. The other 7 justices who currently serve were graduates of Catholic high schools. And that makes Senator Graham's question about her faith and what religion she practices an extra interesting one, in my opinion. And we note also that Jupiter, as the arbiter, the ruler of the ninth house, represents, among other things, religion. Religion and the law, so just interesting. Anyway, also appearing in yesterday's news, excuse me, just got to clear that little froggy in my throat, sorry. Appearing in yesterday's news was U.S. Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks of January 6th insurrection fame, when he urged the crowd prior to the assault on the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. that day to, quote, start taking down names and kicking ass. Since then, despite former President Donald Trump's previous endorsement for Brooks's 2022 election bid to become Alabama's senator, which means moving from the House to the Senate, Brooks was snubbed when Trump withdrew his endorsement for the upcoming May 24th Republican primary, undercutting the congressman's already slim chances in a crowded intra-party race. Apparently he's not doing very well. But basically, Trump was pissed, which he's stated, publicly, about comments Brooks made last summer, or starting last summer. And according to yesterday's New York Times, and I quote here, in retracting his endorsement of Mr. Brooks on Wednesday, Mr. Trump abandoned one of his most loyal acolytes in the House after months of simmering frustration, and as polls showed Mr. Brooks falling behind in his state's Republican primary. In a sign of the former president's continued focus on the 2020 election, he cited Mr. Brooks' remarks at a rally last summer, urging voters to move on from Mr. Trump's 2020 defeat. But here's the kicker and my actual point. After sucking up to Trump all this time to gain the support of his base, but also stating beginning last summer and since that the 2020 election is over, that it would be unconstitutional after the electoral votes were cast to deny that the legitimate president is now Joe Biden, Brooks said yesterday sounded to me, he said what sounded to me like a proof positive lower manifestation of the influence of the recent Mercury-Neptune conjunction. And here's what he said, and I quote, I repeat what has prompted President's ire. The only legal way America can prevent 2020's election debacle is for patriotic Americans to focus on and win the 2022 and 2024 elections so that we have the power to enact laws that give us honest and accurate elections. He added, I've told President Trump the truth, knowing full well that it might cause President Trump to rescind his endorsement. But I took a sworn oath to defend and protect the U.S. Constitution. I honor my oath. That is the way I am. I break my sworn oath for no man. End quote. This from the guy who tried to change the 2020 presidential election's outcome by objecting to the ratification of his state's legally appointed slate of electors who cast their votes on January 6th for now President Biden. Talk about hypocritical doublespeak. I mean, wow. Also, especially as Jupiter waxes toward its April 12th conjunction to Neptune in Pisces, we must try not to let the continued magnification and distribution of mis- and disinformation wear down our patience or resolve. In fact, in short, facts count, and they require the kind of diligent fact-checking, analysis, and conclusions demanded by this past Virgo full moon. Now, when Mercury sextiles Pluto in Capricorn March 26th, we've the opportunity not only to investigate and uncover the cold, hard truth, but also to share it with others. However, the caution is to watch out for intense or increased pressure to persuade others of a particular viewpoint through the use of coercive propaganda, especially within the collective now, such as that I just pointed out is happening at these Senate confirmation hearings, and through the current ongoing propaganda, particularly related to what's been coming out of the Russian Kremlin. So as always, on a personal level, A soul-level check-in can help mitigate any confusion over our ability to discern fact from fiction. Mercury enters Aries on March 27th, adding more fire to the sky and potentially causing communication and rhetoric to become more bombastic. Such warlike cries may well strengthen group loyalty, especially concerning practical financial commitments now, as Venus waxes toward her conjunction to Saturn in Aquarius, March 28th. But this may also cause increased tension because Venus is waxing also toward a square to the transiting karmic nodal axis leading up to the Aries New Moon, which is happening March 30th or April 1st, depending on your time zone. So pursuing particular relationships now may prove karmically troublesome, perhaps as in turning on the collective level. I think one of the illustrations of this energy as it's waxing could be the turning of, say, for example, the United States to other countries who are either under dictatorships or less friendly to supply oil and gas, as we try to reduce and Europe also tries to reduce its reliance on the Russian supply. America only gets about 4% of its gas from Russia, but the Germans and others in the European Union get up to 40%. So, but the U.S. has already made overtures to both Iran and Venezuela, to name just two countries. So it's sort of like, okay, this dictatorship doesn't work for us now, so let's turn to this other dictatorship, which we have obviously sanctioned in the past. So there is a little bit of perhaps, out of necessity, yes, but moving towards not the partners who are the best for us in the long run. Now, yesterday's Mercury-Neptune conjunction also raised the potential use of chemical weapons. Neptune is chemicals, especially I mentioned last week, gases and things like that, not like the gas that comes out of the ground, but things that you cannot see. So the use of the past few days have mentioned the potential use of chemical weapons by Russia in Ukraine, which today Russia was reported to have used phosphorus bombs against Ukrainian civilians in violation of international law. In addition, as Mercury moves to enter Aries on May 27th, we're seeing more vociferous calls along with the committed realignment of NATO, which was substantially weakened during former President Trump's administration, for both humanitarian and military support of Ukraine, especially as we approach the Venus-Saturn meetup in Aquarius on April 4th, which involves commitment among groups, among other things. And today, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg announced, and I quote, "We are concerned partly because we hear the rhetoric." Mercury, Neptune, anyone? "And we've seen before that accusing others creates a pretext for Russia doing the same. Any use of chemical weapons will change the conflict, be a blatant violation of international law, and will have widespread consequences because it will have an effect not only on the people in Ukraine, but those in Eastern Europe as well." So all of this leads us toward next week's March 31st, April 1st, depending on your time zone, Aries New Moon, which allies Mercury, the Moon, the Sun, and wounded healer Chiron in Aries. This implies the wanting to take action, but perhaps action based on passive-aggressive anger. I think we could look to someone like Putin, Russia's Putin, for that, but also potentially being stymied by indecision. Along with Venus's square to the transiting karmic nodal axis at this, around this lunation, followed shortly by Mars square to the nodal axis as well in early April, and Saturn square to the nodes, which perfects later in April, somewhere around April 22nd. These may well prove to be vexing energies in the collective, Anan. Now, the Mars-Saturn's waxing towards its April 4th conjunction at this upcoming lunation as well which is a potentially frustrating energy that can lead to lashing out, but often not at the real target of our anger. And that may impact us all, as well as these collective energies now. So I'll be talking more about all of this next week with a particular focus, of course, on the Aries New Moon lunation. So stay tuned. But now I'd like to introduce today's guest. A full-time professional astrologer since 1969, Lynn Coyner serves as the current president of the Annapolis chapter of the National Council for Geocosmic Research, known as NCGR, and she's known for her articles, research lectures, and teaching of such topics as medical astrology and the psychological patterns of disease, the sextile aspect and the multidimensional experiences, ghosts, UFO sightings, and near-death experiences, fixed stars and the chakras, and trans-Pluto, and more, all of which can be found on her website. Also a certified professional member of the American Federation of Astrologers, which is AFA, the International Society for Astrological Research, ESAR, and the Association for Astrological Networking, or AFAN, which is the legal arm of the astrological community. Lynn teaches medical astrology for the International Academy of Astrology. In addition, she offers a free monthly astrology column as well as astro articles on her website at lynnkoiner.com. And that's, we'll repeat that before the end of the show, but that's LYNN KOINER.com, where she answers questions about the articles. You can find her on Facebook at Lynn Coyner Medical Sharing and NCGR Annapolis's pages. Okay, so hey, Lynn, welcome. How are you today?
Hi, Sherry. You did a really good job with astrological current events. I was very impressed.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that, especially coming from you. Thank you, thank you. I know that you do, a lot of work on the esoteric and the spiritual, the Ballast Bailey and the Casey, and I've found that over the years, we have to try to synthesize these energies, right? So it's sort of like letting your right brain just go, well, if it's Mars, Saturn, and then it's this, and then it's that, well, what would that look like, right? And then looking back to see what it actually did look like. So, but I want to ask you, first of all, I'm thrilled to have you on the show again, so thank you for making time. But I want to ask you, you gave a lecture in February in which you mentioned the transit of Pluto into Aquarius, which begins March 25th of 2023, but Pluto, as we know, is going to retrograde back into Capricorn several times until he moves into Aquarius for the duration of that transit on November 19th of 2024. So I'm wondering, what can you tell us in general about how the energies will shift as Pluto moves from more restrictive, boundaried, structured, business-oriented Capricorn to group-oriented, humanitarian, potentially rebellious Aquarius, and then remains in that sign for 20 years until March of 2043.
Well, I guess to describe what Pluto does in Aquarius, it's you have to kind of look at Pluto in, well, any sign that the Pluto is in, I would say describes the terrorism of the moment. And I find that, at least in the recent years, the sign that Pluto goes through forces us to deal with the issues that were created when Neptune was in that sign. So you think back in around 1984, when Neptune went into Capricorn, all of a sudden there were a lot of things like the, especially under Reagan, like the dissolution of the the Fairness Act. And I remember that if you had a Democrat on for 10 minutes, you had to have a Republican on for 10 minutes. There was fairness in promoting candidates, so you didn't have this everybody whoever wins is going to have to raise the most money. And
right.
So it's a difficult time, and these things were canceled out, and so this gave rise to Rage Radio, and also with the Neptune in Capricorn, you found the beginnings. And I'm really lucky to have a nice retired KGB agent living in my area. So he said that back in, I guess it was around, that would have been Neptune going into Scorpio in 1984. He said that Russia out of St. Petersburg established an organization that was going to put out a lot of conspiracy theories, and it would be like doing things that are liberal, doing things that are conservative, so there would be warring factions. And he says, I know all of this stuff that comes out is really fueled out of St. Petersburg and Russia. So the faster we can get rid of Putin, it may help end some of these things. But
no argument there. But I just want to make one clarification. You said Neptune entered Scorpio in 84, but you meant Pluto, right?
Yes. No. Neptune went into Scorpio in 1984.
No. Neptune went into Scorpio. I was born with Neptune and Scorpio.
Okay.
In the 50s.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, you mean because I know that because my son was born just as Neptune was retrograding back from Sag into Scorp, and that was 95, so that was the tail end. So it was around 84. Good. Yeah, so I just
But anyway, so we're thinking about what goes on with Neptune, with Pluto in Aquarius. And there really is a shift, and there's a big shift in terms of, in the mid-2020s, you're going to find a lot of planets changing signs. And this often indicates a major shift in global energies for the individuals, ending and beginning cycles. So it can be kind of a tumultuous time. When you think of Pluto going into Aquarius, one of the things, and that it goes back and forth in 2024, and then from 2025 to 2043, it's going to be in Aquarius. And I heard another astrologer articulate this very accurately. When planets are in Capricorn, you think of Neptune in Capricorn. You had Dallas, the big hair, big shoulder pads,
right.
And it was, bigger is better. And all of a sudden, greed is good. So Pluto in Capricorn, it glorifies this. It's like people can make money on TikTok, on YouTube. They can, young people can make a lot of money, and so it really glorifies status. When Pluto goes into Aquarius, these things tend to be rejected. It's just more, like you said, about humanitarianism, the common man, but you have to think of what is the terrorism of the moment when Pluto goes into Aquarius. You think back when Neptune was in Aquarius. I remember it was a time when, I got online, I got a computer in the 80s, but then when Neptune went into Aquarius, I got online. You had it was the expansion of the internet, social international connections. And so with Pluto in Aquarius, these things with hacking, like fake news on the internet, these may become the terrorism of the time of that generation when Pluto in Aquarius. Yet the positive aspect of that is that people will, Aquarius is a rational sign. Hasn't done a lot of that with Saturn in Aquarius, but it adds more rational energy to what society and humanity is going through. You have other things that are abstract. Like I remember in the Washington Post, it said the U.S. is considered a radical thinking of the dollar for today's digital world. So you find with now Bitcoin has been around for a while, but you'll see more of this digitalization of commodities, finances. So these are going to be things that undergo a lot of changes. Also, with these planets that went through Earth signs, it does create Earth changes, like Pluto is now in Capricorn, and it does produce a lot of Earth changes. There's the melting of the polar ice caps, and one of the problems with this is, like, I think of the Maldives out there next to India. They're only like 3 feet above water, above sea level. A good wave could destroy that, although China is buying up most of the Maldives. And so there is a lot
Well, what are they going to do with it if it's underwater?
I don't know. Yes, that was a bad investment. And you see that France is moving their vineyards to England, of all places, because it's getting too hot for the grapes. And all of a sudden, England, the climate is changing, and it's much better. And you think back in history when Pluto was in Capricorn, there were debilitating earth changes. We had the Maunder minimum, in which there was like a mini ice age, which led to the French Revolution, not only just because they were out of money financing our revolution, but the cold weather was destroying the crops. So it really does have, like, in modern history, Pluto in Capricorn does have an impact on earth changes. So we'll see a lot of these things that go on with that. When it comes to maybe the earth changes connected with Pluto in Aquarius, you may see more of, this really has to do with a water sign, actually, but as the ice melts, we have more ocean. Now, scientists have discovered that what they call the Earth Wobble is usually caused by the oceans moving back and forth on the globe, mostly water, and so it causes the Earth to wobble. Well, if we get even more water, more ocean, and as it moves about and shifts as the Earth goes around the sun, you're going to find more instability on the planet. There's real dangers in terms of we're getting ready to approach solar max. It starts, maybe 25, 26, but usually the most unstable period is like from now to 2025. I've gone over these solar maxes for decades. I've got an article I need to have published on my work.
A solar max is what? Is that like a sunspot action?
Yes.
What is that
yes.
exactly? Okay.
Every 11 years you have a sunspot cycle. Good grief. A sunspot cycle.
You're taking a cue from me. I stumbled over my words before.
Okay. It's a sunspot cycle. And when it tends to be worse for us and the planet at the couple of years leading up to actual solar max, because we're not used to that. That when there's a hit on the Earth, the ringing on the in the Earth's electromagnetic field, which kind of impacts us. So when, if there's you can look on spaceweather.com to see if there's any ringing in the Earth's electromagnetic field. It's a time not to do like meditation, to meditate through it, to be kind of moving about. If there's a lot of ringing going on and it's causing our own electromagnetic field to kind of vibrate, it's better to get out, do sports, go walking, do things, and go shopping, being physically active.
You don't have to tell me twice.
Yes, I know. Good excuse. I know.
Exactly.
I'm a Virgo, and Virgos, they can tolerate anything as long as there's an excuse. And for me, it's like, there was a solar flare. Oh, it's a good excuse, so I'm not going to worry about it anymore.
I'm going to remember that. Thank you.
Yes. So you're going to notice some of this coming up with solar max coming up, but it's the couple of years leading up to the maximum sunspots that tends to be the most destabilizing. And a lot of times people will have like ringing in the ears, kind of like a type of vertigo, people who are very sensitive. A type of vertigo, and I used to get ear infections every time there was a solar max, starting when I was 6 months old. Now, I can put, stuff in your ears. They have all these little things at the health food store that help out with that. But I used to have those. Every time there was a solar max, I would have a serious ear infection where I almost lose my hearing. There was a Russian physicist, Alexander Dubrov, who wrote Biomagnetism in Life, and he discovered there was an increase in communicable diseases. Like now we have the pandemic. Now the pandemic is really part of that Saturn-Uranus hard aspect, and so, but then all of a sudden you have the beginnings of solar max, which make people more vulnerable to contagious diseases, heart attacks, little things like that. Now, not everybody's going to fall over with a heart attack, but if you're very sensitive to these things, that ringing can be a problem. But we're getting off of really astrological trends, so you've got to keep me on track.
Okay, I will. I'm good at that. So let me ask you one question, because you mentioned Pluto's moving to Aquarius, and you're talking about water. We know Neptune's in Pisces, when it will be for another couple of years. But I want to ask you two things. One is, do you think in a similar fashion, given that Pluto's coming out of Capricorn, made transformations to the climate and the Earth, because Pluto's an Earth sign, that in Aquarius is an air sign? Do you think that will have anything literally to do with air quality?
It may have more to do. I should say that because I even wrote about it.
There you go. I read your mind.
I will tell everybody, if I get too scattered, if you go to LYNNKOINER.com, you can find over 20 pages of everything on my predictions for 2022. Yes. But what it is, there's kind of atmospheric pollution that occurs because of the global warming. The permafrost is melting, and it's releasing methane and these gases into the environment. So there can be a period of what you call atmospheric pollution that takes place from the permafrost. Even though even if we go on all electric cars, if we do things about fossil fuels, there's certain other things that are going to be taking place. We need to learn how to use these things. I know in where I live in Maryland, the big problem as an agricultural state is the cow manure and horse manure.
Oh, yes. I read about that. Yeah.
It also releases gases into the environment. And there's one farmer who's got about an acre that's nothing but cow poop, and he's covered it, and he uses the gas that comes from that to provide electricity for 3 other farms. So we really need to learn to work with these things rather than allow them going in the atmosphere, to use them as sources of energy. And that includes the permafrost. Go ahead.
Do you remember the movie Mad Max?
Oh, I didn't watch it.
Well, I think there were 3 different versions, and it was the one with, the singer, the black woman singer who's famous, Ike and Tina Turner.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
One of those movies, and I think it was the 3rd in the trilogy, was about the fact that they were running out of fuel, right? So nobody could drive or do anything or whatever. And one of the solutions was to corral all of the pigs. Capture they didn't explain it that way, but I think they were talking about the same thing, to capture the methane, to convert it into energy so that they can continue to sustain human life. So it's sort of like what you're talking about is the future potentially coming into fruition from things that have been thought about like 40 years ago or whatever.
We have to learn those rather than having them go into the atmosphere and polluting the atmosphere and reducing the amount of oxygen on this planet.
Well, it reminds me of something that I read that Liz Green had said, which was like talking about Aquarius energy. It's like it's so forward thinking that it's like you get burned at the stake as a witch for saying things that are prescient and that'll come true 100 years later, and then they make you a saint.
Yes.
So maybe the Mad Max writers will get that. Who knows? But let me ask you too. Saturn's going to also in the short term, move into Pisces in early March of 2023. And usually, Saturn has about a 2.5 year transit, maybe 3 with its retrogrades. But that's a water sign, and he'll be joining Pisces in that sign, much later in his transit. But anything more related to water or Saturn, because Saturn to me is like a dam, right? And Pisces is like, let's push against the dam.
Saturn going into Pisces, let me say something. Years ago, Bill Meridian, I love him. It's actually Bill Cerubi now, but his professional name was Meridian when he wrote for Del Horoscope. I just love him and his predictions. And I remember we'd meet at Mary Downing's house. It would just be a bunch of us. And he talked about when there are an emphasis on the Virgo Pisces area, in the horoscope, often you have events which affect Black people. You think of back in the
slavery.
in the mid 60s we had the revolution. Equal rights. We had the civil rights going on. So it does impact that. And I know at least the last time Saturn was in Pisces, it wasn't an easy time. And, back then Saturn in Pisces was well aspected the Capricorn planets and Pluto in Scorpio. So you would think it would have been an easy transit, everybody becoming more spiritual and humanitarian. Now this was like a 93, 94, 95.
Yeah, my son has it. Yeah, my son has a Saturn-Venus conjunction in Pisces. Yeah.
Well, what it is it was a very difficult time. You had the Balkans War. You had the massacre in Rwanda. The president of Israel, Rabin, was assassinated.
That's right.
And the O.J. Simpson trial, and Russia invaded Chechnya. The good things that occurred were that Eastern Europe was invited to join NATO. I was really surprised when I went through the Balkan countries a few years ago that all of them had their members of NATO. And so that occurred. So there was an emphasis on joining. Here we have maybe, if we get through this with Ukraine, we may draw them into NATO. And
you know what? That's really, really interesting. I want to pause there just for a second because it's such a topic of interest for me because, I was reading the other day that Lithuania, I think it is, has a stretch, about a 40-mile stretch, which is the only, it's the closest bordering NATO nation to Russia. So they were saying that if Russia expands its attacks beyond Ukraine, it would come through this one portal, you know what I mean? So they're all getting ready. But it feels like Saturn and Pisces may well be related to the repercussions from whatever happens out of this skirmish.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Very good, very good, because these cycles are connected, and this is what happened the last time Saturn was in Pisces. And so here we're having getting ready to reconsider what happens to Ukraine. For your listeners who are interested in scholarly information on the war in Ukraine, I printed out the wrong date. We are blessed to have a postgraduate college here in Washington called the Institute of World Politics. And you just Google them. And on March 29th at 10:30 Eastern Daylight Time, they are having a discussion on the war in Ukraine. These are scholars, people from in the State Department. They teach spycraft and statecraft at this, and they open up their lectures to the public. Not many public go, but boy, when they had in-person lectures, I was right there, and some incredible people came to give talks. So I was just thrilled by this. But anybody can sign up for this. Just go to their website and look for events, and it's 10:30 on March 29th.
That's great. And it's the Institute for, what did you say it was called? Institute for Public Policy?
No.
Oh, okay.
Institute of World Politics.
Okay.
It's iwp.edu. And then it would, but it's Institute for World Politics, because anybody who wants to go in the state, in the State Department, CIA, FBI, you really need to go there and do your postgraduate work. So that's free, and you can hear about what's really going on, insider scoop on the war in Ukraine.
Great. Go I want to skip over to something that's coming up in the near future, which is this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at 2357 Pisces, which is going to happen on April 12th. Do you have any advice, any take? One of the questions I'm going to ask you, because I want to ask you about your medical astrology teaching too before we run out of time, and I know that you do make recommendations, but this is such a interesting energy that can either cause us, I think, to be really ungrounded, and confused and things like that, given especially all this other stuff happening in the collective. So what do you think this energy represents, how it might manifest, and what can we do as individuals to kind of get through it, That
is kind of be rational, logical, and as you say, tap into that inner core of integrity and your higher self. You talked about this a lot in the introduction, and it's a very good point for dealing with the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. You have to think of Neptune in Pisces. I mean, when it first went into Pisces in 2012, I had people that I knew who were kind of had a tenuous grip on reality.
You mentioned this in your lecture. I was listening to it again. I was like, oh my God, tell that story. It's really amazing.
And what it is I had people, clients and friends call me, and they'd be laughing, and they'd say, guess where I am? I'm in the funny farm. And I knew they were on their medications. And then somebody said, well, you haven't heard from me in a while because I've been in a mental institution. And I thought, this is just kind of an introductory thing. But I will tell you, Neptune in Pisces in this cycle has promoted delusions, delusional thinking. And so when Jupiter aligns with Neptune, it can make one more spiritual, but it can also make you more delusional. Even in terms of economic things, it can create kind of a bubble in the stock market. Because when Neptune goes into Aries, a fire sign, it always causes inflation. And we have the, the Neptune-Saturn aspect that occurs, is it in 2024? And what that does is it usually causes kind of a recession. So inflations and recessions tend to go hand in hand with each other. Neptune-Saturn, when it occurs, it's going to be at the world point, at 0 Pisces. So that it really, humanity will be very strongly affected by this. The cardinal points, Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn, 0 degrees is the world point. So things that happen, whether it's something in our personal charts or something that's going on globally, like the Saturn-Neptune aspect, has to have a very powerful global impact. I will say something. I don't know how. There was a Mike Kirk who's written some articles, and he said that the period around from the first, 3 weeks of March of 2022 is going to be the peak of a planetary action for crises. Now, he wrote this some time ago, and of course, just before that was Russia invaded the Ukraine. And he says it comes up again. It's going to really last through the middle of May of 2022, the month of August and the month of October. And October may be more turbulent with regard to the stock market. Okay. When it comes to the Neptune, see, I ramble.
Let me ask you. Okay.
No, I've got something to say about the Neptune conjunction.
Absolutely. Okay.
It was Andre Barbeau. He did a lot of research on this, and he says this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, and especially in Pisces, tends to pretend a swing to the left politically, which is unusual. And he said that, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in Aquarius in 2009 heralded the election of a very liberal Democratic president. Unfortunately, it wasn't a Congress that was liberal. So it tends to bring a shift towards more liberal politics. So that's the good part of the Jupiter and Neptune conjunction. Okay, go ahead. Ask
what I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned it as well, and referenced what I said earlier, Jupiter-Neptune, because it can be such a highly spiritual time, but also, excuse me, sorry about that. Because you mentioned the solar max stuff, and that's going on for a couple of years, and, it's better to not meditate during certain periods and to go out and move. I'm wondering, because I think a lot of people who listen to this show and other astrological shows and writings and, read things and et cetera, study astrology, are empaths and have psychic capabilities and tendencies. And I am curious to know your opinion about this portion of time with this conjunction and what follows, how a person can discern when they are doing their channeling and they are doing their meditation, etc., what is true for them that's coming through to them. Because I think that a lot of times people are confused about the messages they get. and therefore they don't get the full benefit of what they are connecting with. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I tell you, one of the things, you probably do this yourself, I'm often a good barometer as to how the energies are working out. And all of a sudden, as things are, the Neptune is usually when a planet is in the middle section of the sign, you start to really see what's happening with it. And I stopped having a meditation group in my house a few years ago, and then we had the pandemic. But all of a sudden, as we're getting ready to shift into these more powerful Neptunian, Piscean energies, I just all of a sudden have this great urge I need to have a study group in my house again. So I've kind of put it out to the ARE. Anybody's interested in a study group? I've renovated my home. I've got a big living room now. I said, I really want to start doing some of these things. I even created kind of chairs and putting my crystals around, making a trust fund for my cats and my crystals, my most important possessions. And so they can't leave the house. So I just see this. And with empaths, it's not like it's a bad time to meditate. It's never a bad time to meditate. But, you can look, if you feel like when I'm meditating, I just feel this agitation going on. Then if you do, you just stop and look on spaceweather.com. And if you go down the left column, you'll see KP index. And if it's kind of ringing red, then you know, well, this isn't a good time. It'll pass in a couple of hours. Then I can meditate. So it's usually a short period. If it's a really bad ringing, it may last a few hours. But if you just sense that, and when oh my goodness, we only have 5 minutes.
I know we only have a couple minutes, so but you finish what you're saying, and then I want to.
What it is in the last solar max, I sometimes I'd be outside and I feel like something's happened on the sun, and I'd come in and look on space weather, and sure enough, there was a coronal mass ejection.
Wow.
Empaths are going to be very sensitive to this, and I always say, well, with solar max, it's important to have like big pillows and stuffy things and nice curtains or whatever to kind of a cushion from that energy that will be taking place. The next couple of years is the strongest. Once we get into true solar max, our bodies have adjusted to it. It's not really a problem. But empaths will be sensitive to this. And if you think, am I crazy? Go look on space weather and you'll find out you're not crazy. There's something that happened on the sun, a coronal mass ejection, or something's hit the Earth. So that's important. But I also sense with myself this urge to kind of do some meditation and spiritual things. One of the things, and I need to, on my, I haven't put it on my website because it's a lot of work. On my monthly column, I always add important times for multidimensional experiences. When there are sextile clusters, you don't have to worry about what it is. And there's certain periods where psychic experiences are more powerful than others, connecting with multidimensional realities. So if anybody signs up for that column, and I usually post it on my website, so you don't have to write to me. It's usually a time when you can connect to multidimensional realities. I remember I was taking a private tour in Poland, and they took me to one of these caves where Hitler was, having all these things made. And as soon as I walked in, all of a sudden I saw something on my left eye, and I thought, what? And all of a sudden, I will tell you, I saw a Nazi soldier had this big kind of coat on, and his head walk in front of me, and I thought, is this real? And I had to kind of run down the tunnel to see if it was. There was nothing there, and I went back and I looked on my little publication that said that was a powerful sextile cluster, which makes it easier to make connections with multidimensional realities, contact guides, CEOs, whatever. So, I do post that on my monthly column. I haven't yet gone to do that on my website, but I do have an article on that on my website. Ask questions.
We'll come back. Now, I want to know in the last couple of minutes we have, just if you could tell, because we already told people how to reach you and all that. I don't know if you've got anything. I know you're starting a new medical astrology class, right? Isn't that starting in April? Is that correct?
And I was trying to get the phone to stop. What did you say?
I said I believe you're starting a new medical astrology class in April. Is that right?
The new one is for advanced students.
Okay.
Until the fall that I start a course one. These are really geared towards more advanced people or people who are in the medical profession. But anybody can take course 1 or 2. And course 2 has transits and progressions. But you can look on on the Facebook and you can get that information. I'm distracted.
Okay, so they can find you. No, that's okay. I know the phone. So your medical, the page that I gave before was, hang on, Lynn Coyner Medical Sharing. So people can look that up because I want to make sure that everybody knows.
And the Pure Astrology is NCGR Annapolis. You can sign up and I'll approve you.
Okay, cool. And I post there too. Thank you very much because you let me, so I appreciate that very much. So is there anything else that's coming up for you? Any other?
It.
That's it? Boom?
That's
it? We're done. Okay.
Okay, already, thank you.
No, Lynn, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You don't have to hang up abruptly. I want to thank you first for sharing everything. I do hope you'll come back. I'm going to hit you up again, to be back on the show maybe in a couple months because what you have to say is extremely valuable and also extremely interesting. So, a little bit off the beaten path.
You asked about health things and the transits. If you go on my website, I have Uranus transits, Neptune transits, and Pluto transits, and it'll address medical issues.
Okay. I think it's also, one of the areas I'm interested in and I have used with my clients is to identify what I call intuitive/psychic capabilities in the chart. And oftentimes people don't realize that their aptitudes or what I would call their gifts are energies that not everybody else has. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Maybe we'll get together a time when we can talk about that and maybe in addition to the sextile stuff because I think I have a
lot of information on that.
I know.
How one can develop that. So I'd be glad to talk about that.
Yeah, let's plan something. All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and thanks everyone else for joining us today. I hope you found the information presented here helpful as you continue your karmic evolution in this lifetime. Be sure to join me next week, March 31st, for another episode of Karmic Evolutions, Astrologically Speaking. Until then, may your journey be filled with karmic healing and the joy of greater consciousness. Namaste.
Long ago, before this day's confusion did begin, throughout the stars did we go wandering. Distance was no barrier, and time it had no hope. Free to come